And again, I want to move on a little bit here to where things stand. You mentioned that obviously California has appealed this ruling to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and so there's been a little bit of movement there. We haven't gotten a decision on the requested stay. This judge also issued his ruling without a stay, right? That's one key bit as well.
Yeah, so the state at the hearing, which ended up being an hour before his ruling, asked if he ruled for us to any degree that he stay that ruling so they could have time to appeal, and he didn't. And I think this being the status quo is a big reason why he ignored that request. So now they're asking the Ninth Circuit on an emergency basis. So this will be heard by a 3-judge panel that handles the emergency appeals for this month. It rotates every month. It's not the same panel that's ultimately going to hear the appeal on the merits.
Right. So California has appealed. Yeah. So the judge issued the ruling. He didn't put a stay on it, which means it's in effect right now. Although,
yes,
in practice, it doesn't really mean anything because the law wasn't going into effect until January anyway. 1st, right? But it's in effect now. The mechanics of that means that while California is appealing this ruling, they want the appeals court to issue a stay to make sure that their law does go into effect in January. That would be the practical application of all this. Like, California wants the law to go in effect. This ruling, as it stands now, would keep it from going into effect, would keep things as the status quo, like the way they are today. Well, depending on when you're listening to this, because we're filming it on the 28th of December. So in a couple of days, this will have more practical implications. But, as we reach the new year here, the state wants a stay on the lower court ruling, which would let them put their law into effect. You guys don't want that stay to be issued so that the law will not be able to go into effect, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we filed we got an order on Christmas Eve telling us, what the scheduling order is. At that point, we were already working on it. In fact, I started drafting our opposition before I even had the state's motion because I knew it was coming and I knew what they'd argue. And it wasn't surprising. But anyway, so we filed our opposition, and the basic themes of our opposition are 3 things. First of all, we're likely to succeed on the merits for all the reasons the district court said. But second, we're preserving the status quo.
Which tends to be
that should favor us,
like a thing that courts
that should
like
be
to
important.
do in these sorts of situations, right?
Not in Second Amendment cases. The New York and New Jersey ones were allowed to go into effect. At least I think New Jersey stayed the vampire rule and the restriction on carrying or didn't stay those, but stayed the rest. But anyway, so that should favor us.
I guess there kind of tends to be a favorance towards the government in a lot of these situations. Like, if the law is already in effect, courts like to leave it in effect until the merits get played out. If it's not in effect yet, they might still let it go into effect while the legal challenge gets played.
Unfortunately, yes. And they're not supposed to do that, but they do. So we argue we're just preserving the status quo here. We do cite, we cite some of the Ninth Circuit dissents in Duncan, which said, like, this court doesn't take the Second Amendment seriously, basically. So we're kind of telling the court, hey, this is a chance to redeem yourself. At least give us this. At least give us, when the status quo is on our side, don't let the law go into effect. We argue that the state doesn't have damages because, again, people with CCW permits are law-abiding. And finally, we point out that the Hawaii injunction has been in effect since August. So that was a little funny in that Hawaii tried to stay it with the Ninth Circuit, and go ask the district court first, then come back to us, because that's the proper process. So they went and asked the district court in August. District court did nothing. And then bizarrely, Hawaii didn't go back to the Ninth or do anything, which is great for gun owner, people with carry permits in Hawaii that they didn't, but it was a little strange. So we're telling the Ninth Circuit now, look, this injunction in Hawaii has been in effect this whole time and no harm has resulted. So it would be crazy unfair for you to take away Californians' right to carry, while this Hawaii injunction remains in place. And I think the Hawaii appeal, it's been fully briefed. It'll be heard in April. There's a chance our case now might be consolidated with that one because they do want a quick briefing schedule. I think the state's opening brief is due in January, our opposition in February. So it sounds like they're trying to move us in with Wolford and decide this all at once. That's just speculation, though. We'll see what the Ninth Circuit does.
Speaking of speculation here, you mentioned that the scheduling for all this was put out on December 24th, so Christmas Eve, and it was after hours, right?
Yeah. It was late in the evening on Christmas Eve. And there is speculation. You can read that either way. It could be that the Ninth Circuit is moving quickly to help California before the January 1st deadline. You could also interpret it as a panel favorable to us trying to keep this before the motions panel changes on January 1st. Because what they could do is issue what's called an administrative stay, which stays the ruling, so stays our win until the first couple weeks of January until a panel can look at it. So then they'll decide it, and people will lose their right to carry for a couple weeks, I guess, or until it's done. But they didn't do that. They clearly want to decide this before January 1st. They told us on December 24th for us to respond by December 27th, and the state gets till tomorrow, December 29th at noon, to file its reply. And then it sounds like we'll have a ruling tomorrow afternoon. We don't know that for sure. It might go into the weekend. But
that would be December 29th as we're recording here. Because obviously people will listen to this a little later.